In episode 45, we're about to meet Turrmagar, the leader of the Tuskas. So the story begins in the Castler's control room. Tigra and along with the Thunderkins just heard the sound of the alarm that was going off in the control room, so they arrived to find out what happened. But as you may have guessed it, the trio are not the only ones who heard the alarm in the control room, because outside, Lionel, Chitara, and Panthro have heard the alarm in the Thunder Tank. Back at the control room, Tigra and the Thunderkin saw on the screen what is going on. A goblin, and riding on it is Turrmagar, the leader of the Tuskas. Back with the Thunder Tank, with Lionel, Panther, and Chitara, they're now on their way to Cat's Lair. So meanwhile there, we have Turrmagar, the leader of the Tuskas, trying to find the Cat's Lair on his goblin. And luckily, he found it. Back in the control room, that's when the kittens told Tigra he doesn't look like a bad guy. He was trying to find a place to land. So after, long story short, Tigra told the Thunderkins to turn off the alarms. Meanwhile, outside of Cat's Lair, Timurgar and his goblin are trying to find a safe place to land without crashing into anything or anyone. Back in the control room, the kittens panicked and said that Turmagar's gonna crash. Outside of Cat's Lair, Turrmagar, the leader of the Tuskas, just found out the alarm on his goblin went off. And then, long story short, luckily for the goblin, it manages to crash land somewhat intact. And Turrmagar, too. Well, good news for Turrmagar, he landed safely on the ground. But as for the goblin, it's in terrible shape. Back in the control room, when the trio, Tigra and the kittens, found out that Turrmagar had crashed, they rushed to the scene. So by the time that Tiger and the kittens had arrived, they found out that Turmagar had a bad bump on his head, but is otherwise fine. Back with the Thunder Tank, they also rushed to the scene to find out what happened. So, long story short, back with the Thunder Tank with Chitara, Lionel, and Panther, despite a minor setback, they too arrived at the scene just like what the Kittens and Tigra did. So Lionel was asking who he is. Well, Termagard was more than happy to introduce himself, and he is the leader of the Tuskas. So Chitara was asking him, why is he here? So Termagard explains why he arrived in the first place, because he said he needed the Thundercats' help. For what reason? Lionel asked. Well, Turpingar was more than happy to explain to tell the Thundercats the bad news. There's a problem at Tuska country where he comes from, and it's running out of water. And Termagar says, wait, there's a bigger problem, because he said that he and his people have been constantly under attack, and the reason why they're running out of water is because of the Technopede that was there. So Panthro has his turn to speak a case to ask a question. So you want me to eliminate this Technopede, right? So Termagar said that there's some even worse news. If the Technopede isn't defeated, and if the Thundercats don't help him right away, that there's a serious consequences. That means every water in the area will dry up. So that means it's a serious problem. In other words, in Termagar's case, he also said that he and his people will never survive without water. Don't worry, Lionel says. We'll help you. So after Lionel had pleaded a case with Termagar that they'll destroy the Technopede, so Panthro made a suggestion. Take the Thunder Tank. I think you're gonna need it. In the meantime, I'll stay behind. So Termagar explained to Panthro what the creature is that just crash landed earlier. It's a goblin, he explains. Then Termagar also explains that even better, Termagar and his ancestors had domesticated the goblins many centuries ago. So after Panther had learned about it, he says, well, I'll fix them as good as new. Well, Lionel and the others can take care of your Technopede problem, he suggested. And so, the Thunder Tank that has Turnagar, the leader of the Tuskas, the Thundercats, and Snarf all head off to Tuska country, where Turnagar and his friends come from. So, as the Thunder Tank went under the water, they never seen anything like it before. They being the Thundercats and of course Snarf, who went along with Termagar, the leader of the Tuskas. Now, Lionel couldn't help but compliment to say how beautiful the river looks with all the species and different kinds of life. Well, true in Turrmagar's case. So after what Lionel saw what the flower did with the fish, that's when Turrmagar told Lionel this advice. True, the river may have some life in it, but don't be deceived because it has a lot of dangers. Well, Lionel has his turn to agree with Termagard, but then pleads his case to say fish-eating flowers are not going to harm the Thundercats in any way. Well, that may be true, Termagard says, but nothing compares to what the dangers you're going to face in Tuscania, he said. So long story short, a current of some kind just caught the Thunder Tank, but that doesn't mean that Tiger's going to do anything about it. So what he did is that he pressed a button to give the Thunder Tank more power to get itself out of the current. Well, good news for the Thunder Tank, it manages to get out of the current. Now here comes the bad news. The Black Widow shark just came up out of nowhere and is now on the roof of the Thunder Tank. So back with the Black Widow shark still holding onto the Thunder Tank, on his side of course. Well, Chitara and Tigra knew that they have a plan. So you're probably wondering what was the plan. One of the first things they did that they surfaced first, they went back into the water, and then before you know it, the Black Widow shark finally gets off the Thunder Tank. But unfortunately, the Black Widow shark didn't stay off the Thunder Tank for long because it came back, and after it went back on the Thunder Tank on the roof again for the second time. But, aha, Tiger told Chitara that he has a plan to shock her off. So guess what he did? He uses the electroshock of the Black Widow shark to get it off the Thunder Tank, and so it did. So now that the Black Widow shark is finally off the Thunder Tank, that's the good news. The Thunder Tank continues to go to the Tuscana country, where Turrmagar comes from. So, according to Lino, he just lets Turrmagar know that there's some light up ahead. You mean we're actually there, Snarfast? Not yet, Turrmagar said. So long story short, back with the Thunder Tank, after it surfaced from the water, that's when the Thundercats, including Snarf and Termagant, just heard some weird singing from nearby. So Chitara told the others that the singing is coming from the island that's just up ahead. So she suggested they should investigate, so that's what they did. So by the time that everybody got out of the tank, the singing gets louder and louder. So, as everybody investigated on the island, that's when Tigra went to see where that singing was coming from. So, when Chitara spotted a mermaid up ahead that lives on the island, that's when Snarf looked around after Termagard had pleaded the case. He says that something was off. And he says, I don't think we should hang around here a lot longer. That's a good idea, Lionel said. Let's get out of here. But they didn't even realize that Tigra was missing. So speaking of Tiger back with him, guess where he's going? He's going to find out where the singing is coming from, and it's from the exact same mermaid that Chitara saw earlier. So Tiger went closer and closer to the stranger. When back with Chitara, she tries to run to catch up with him. So back with Tiger, the Thundercats, he gets closer and closer and closer to the mermaid, the same one that Chitara saw earlier. But what he doesn't even realize was about to happen next. So he sat down along across with her. Well, back with Chitara, now that she finally arrived at where Tiger and the mermaid was, but what Tiger doesn't even realize, it's not an ordinary mermaid, it's a vampire mermaid. So back with Chitara, she shouted at Tiger to look out, but he chose to ignore her. So, you know the saying, desperate times comes for desperate measures. In Chitara's case, what she did is that she threw the baton and it landed on the ground. That causes Tiger to look over his shoulder to look at Chitara. That got his attention. So back with Chitara, she waited for Lionel, Snarf, and Termagar to arrive on the scene. By the time they did, back with Tigra, he just found out what had happened, so he avoided the vampire mermaid's attack. So back with Tigra, bad news for him, he fell off the cliff after he dodged the vampire mermaid's attack and went into the water. So after Tiger fell into the water, the vampire mermaid went in after him. And that's when Lionel said to Chitara that he has to go after Tiger, so he too went into the water to catch up with both Tigra and the vampire mermaid. Snarf, meanwhile, wanted to go with Lionel too, but unfortunately his tail got stuck. Well, back with Snarf, good news for him. He manages to get his tail unstuck. So anyway, back with Tigra, who is still in the water, he's unconscious at the moment, and that's when the vampire mermaid catches up with him. But she's not alone, because also in the water were Lino and Chitara, and they're trying to catch up to the vampire mermaid, well, her and Tigra. So back with Lino, he spotted a water snake that's coming to attack, but luckily he dodges the attack. So long story short, after that minor attack by the water snake, Lino did what he knew best. He uses his sword power to attack back, so that's what he did. So good news, now that the water snake's taken care of, now all Lino has to do is catch up to the vampire mermaid, so that's what he did. So speaking of the vampire mermaid, back with her, she's still trying to catch up to the unconscious Tigra. When back with Lino, he's still swimming to catch up with her. So long story short, back with Lino, he did what any good guy would do after he caught up with a vampire mermaid. He uses his sword power against her, and when she found out what had happened, she looked over her shoulder, and then she attacked back at Lino. So back with Lino, despite a minor attack from the vampire mermaid, he swims away, and the vampire mermaid catches up with him. As for Chitara, good news for her, she manages to rescue Tiger when she did. So back with Lionel with the vampire mermaid still pursuing him, but not for very long, that's when he went face to face with her. But then, aha, Lionel has a plan. And what does he do? He uses the sword power on her first to get her into the cave that was right behind her. So he did. So back with Lionel, what he did next is that he uses the sword power on a rock so that he can seal her inside of the cave so that she won't be bothering them anymore. So after that, he heads off to join up with Chitara. And the good news is that the three of them made it to shore. So now that everyone had made it to shore, they met back with Turrmagar and Snarf. One of the first things Tiger did was to thank Chitara and Lionel for saving him when he did. So Snarf had pleaded a case, and he's not kidding, to coin a phrase, of course. Let's just hope that's the last time we had this fishy business to attend, he said. So meanwhile, back at Cat's Lair and with Panthro, good news for him, the goblin that Turrmagar has is now all fixed up. So all Panthro has to do is to make sure that it's working okay. So he took it for a flight test. So, in Panthro's case, he passed the flight test with flying colors, to coin a phrase. So, back with the Thunder Tank with Turrmagar, Snarf, and the rest of the Thundercats, they're now on their way to the Tuska country where Turrmagar comes from, without any further interruptions, of course. So good news for the Thunder Tank. It finally arrived at Tuska Country, but now here comes a problem. When Lionel, along with Chitara, Tigra, Snarf, and Termagar, the leader of the Tuska, just saw the explosion up in the sky, and it's coming from Tuska Country. So Lionel had that suspicious thought that they didn't make it in time, or so they thought. So we know what this means. Thanks to Tigra, the Thunder Tank, along with everybody else, has to hurry up and get there. So meanwhile at Tuska Country, the Tuskas are having a battle with a Technopede, the one that Turrmagar had told the Thundercats about in the beginning of the episode. So long story short, one of the Tuskas panicked and said, "We gotta get out of here," but the other said, "No way," and the reason being is because there's no way they can abandon a post like that, he said. According to what the Tuska also says, that would really upset Turrmagar, and help will never arrive. So the Tusker panicked and says, "So what are we going to do about it?" So here comes the Technopede now, and it's coming closer and closer to the two Tuskas. So what the Tuskas did is that they're trying to defend themselves the best way they knew how, and as the Technopede goes closer and closer, the Tuskas are trying to fight it off the best they could until help arrived. So long story short, during the battle between the Tuskas and the Technopede, by the time that the Thunder Tank did arrive with Turrmagar, the leader of the Tuskas, and the rest of the Thundercats, Turrmagar got upset and he says, "Oh no, the city is in ruins. We're too late," he said. "Now there's no hope for neither myself or my people," he said. Then Turrmagar also pleaded the case to say it's hopeless, there's no way for my people to protect the waters anymore, and etc. To make Turrmagar feel better, that's when Lion says, "We can't give up yet. We'll straighten the whole thing out," he said. So Chitara has her turn to make Turrmagar feel better to say, "We can't quit yet." That's when Snarf says, "Because we're fighting along this battle with you," he said. He's not kidding. And so the Thunder Tank is on its way. Well, back with the Thunder Tank, despite the fact that it's been stuck for a while, but then once it regains its traction, that's when Termagar panicked and says, "Oh no, it's the Technopede! We're lost," he said. So back with the Thunder Tank, it went face to face with a Technopede for the first time. Oh, by the way, it's the Thundercats' first visit to Tuscany. Anyway, thanks to Lionel using the Thunder Tank's cannon, it begins firing at the Technopede the best way it knew how. Long story short, because of the Technopede's attack, the Thunder Tank went spinning out of control. So when Tigra suggested that all the Thundercats should get out and fight, that's when Termagar panicked and says, "That could mean total destruction if you did that." "True," Chitara says, "but we don't have a choice," she said. So now that everybody got out of the tank, you know what this means. Three of the Thundercats agreed to split up, so that's what they did. First up is Chitara. And so, thanks to her super speed, she knows what she does best. She makes the Technopiece cannons wake all wacko so it couldn't be targeting anyone or anywhere. So, Chitara goes one-on-one with the Technopede, and she, however, had dodged every attack that it did, and the next thing she did was to use her baton to jump straight up on the top of it, and then Tigra shows up. So when Tiger arrived, that's when Chitara went over to Technopiece. So it's now his turn, and he uses his bowler whip, and he climbed on the top of it. So long story short, thanks to Tigra, the first thing he did is after he uses his bowler whip, he avoided the cannon's attack. So the last one up is Lino. One of the first thing he did is that he ran underneath the Technopede until he reaches the tail end. So he did. So long story short, thanks to the cloud line that Lionel used, he went on top of the back part of the Technopede, ran through the cannons, and then he reaches the neck part where he figured is his weakness. So, long story short, Lionel tries to pry open the panel for the Technopede with his sword the best way he knew how, but then he got blasted off. Chitara panicked, but thanks to Lionel's claw line, it manages to save him. Remember Turrmagar's goblin that Panthro fixed up back at the lair? Well, thanks to Panthro, he's good as new. But Panthro's not alone because with him are the Thunder Kittens. So with Turrmagar's goblin, they all arrived at the Tuska country just as the four of them did, and Turrmagar the leader of the Tuskas. So back with Tigra, he attempts to save Lionel the best way he knew how with his bullwhip. He says, "Don't worry, I'll save you." But then the Technopede decided to shoot at Termagar's goblin with the Thunderkins and Panthro that was riding on top of it. So when Lionel found out what had happened, he did what any good guy would do. He uses his Thundercat signal from his sword, so that's what he did. So back with Turrmagar's goblin and along with Panthro and the Thunder Kittens, they're now on their way down to join in the fight, of course, after they saw the signal. So long story short, while the Technopede was busy attacking, that's when Wily Cat suggested to his sister that they should attack from underneath it instead. So that's what happened. So long story short, now that the goblin went underneath the Technopede, that's when Panthro and the Thunderkins got off. So the first ones up were the Thunderkins. One of the first things they did is they used their ropes around the Technopede's legs, back with Lionel still on his claw line until thanks to the Groblin that Pethro fixed back at the lair, he manages to get on top of it. Lionel, that is. So, long story short, after Lionel got off the Groblin, that's when one at a time each of the Thundercats have their turn in attacking it. First is Tigra, then the Thundercats started pulling from their ropes. Next is Chitara, she uses her baton. Next is Panthro, he uses his power of his nunchucks. So finally, long story short, thanks to the Thundercats, the Technopede is defeated. And even better, Turrmagar and the Tuskas are not only happy to see that the Thundercats had helped them out when they did, also what's even more better is that, thanks to them, their water supply is saved. And so is their home. So the very next morning, while nursing the water, the rest of the Thundercats had been thanked by Turrmagar for everything that they did. The next thing he said was, thanks to them, the water supply has been rescued. Luckily for Lino, he owes it all to Pedro the kittens. They just showed up when they did. And Tiger wasn't kidding when it's his turn to plead his case. He says they're lucky that they are needed when it counts. And of course, what's even more better is that Termagard became the sixth friend on the Thundercats friends list. And so that ends episode 45.